Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Edition of the Sports Ballers podcast. My name is Eric. I've got hosting duties this week. I'm at Cory's place doing the show for the first time. His new place.
Yeah, first time in the new place. And first time we're in the same room for a episode other than the draft special in a while.
Yeah, we took a little bit of a hiatus from being in person due to the Omicron spread and also just pure laziness at times probably and other inconveniences to get in the way. But I am here with Cory. Evan is virtual as usual out there in beautiful Mount Airy, or beautiful if you're into that type of thing. I'm not sure Evan is, but
beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yes, indeed. So we got a little bit of stuff to get through today. Some breaking news in the NFL that has little to do with the actual football play, but you know it's May, so that's normal. But it is still a big story nonetheless. So let's start there. Actually, let's start with the professional football. Fox announces that Tom Brady will be their top analyst when he stops playing football, meaning he's going to join Kevin Burkhardt in the booth as Fox's A-team on Sundays. And apparently, according to a report I saw on Twitter, he's making crazy money. More money than he ever made playing football.
And more money than Tony Romo. So
by double.
He better be good.
Yeah, I saw 10 years, $375 million. That is the type of contract that you would expect someone like Bryce Harper to sign. It's almost a contract that Mike Trout signed to play baseball.
He better be predicting the play we're about to see and the play after that for that kind of money.
Right. Now let's be clear here. I do think that Brady obviously has to be good, but I think this is clearly also he's Tom Brady. There's that factor of it. So I don't think he has to be great for this to pay off for them. He just has to be – he can't be Jason Witten. He can't be terrible at it. But the fact that Brady is involved will draw viewers because he's Tom Brady. He's clearly – other than maybe Peyton Manning, he's the guy you want if you're going to tap a recently retired or soon-to-be retired football player to replace Troy Aikman, who is left for ESPN.
At the same time, if he's not good in the booth, and people are going to notice, and they're going to they will stop watching for that reason. Now, you'll still get the people who are going to watch either way because it's freaking football on Fox on a Sunday in the fall and the winter. We are not going to stop watching just because he's bad, but we're going to rip on him endlessly in the chats if he's bad.
And on this podcast.
But anybody that this deal is meant to draw in and try and convince them, hey, you should watch our broadcast on Sundays, if he's not great, you're not keeping those people.
No, I fully agree with you there. But my point is that his status as Tom Brady is the draw. He just has to do the job appropriately, and I think this is going to pay dividends because, again, he's Tom Brady. But Evan, we discussed this a little bit on the chat before we got started today. We're both pretty sure that Fox didn't just dole out $375 million, completely reset the market for color analysts in football broadcasting without at least seeing whether Tom Brady could actually do the job, right?
I would assume that they did their due diligence and auditioned him and did a practice game or two. You don't just sign somebody to $300 million just because, doesn't matter if he's the greatest quarterback of all time. If he can't call games well, then somebody just threw $300 million right in the trash.
Yeah, fully agree. Like I said, he doesn't have to be as good as Tony Romo. That's kind of my point. It's not that he has to be, he's got to top Romo because being Tom Brady will carry some weight. but he can't suck. Like, he can't go out there and be like, gee, Tom, thanks for the obvious thing. Like we kind of had with Drew Brees a little bit this year, where they waited 3 possessions later to point out, hey, that was kind of weird when Joe Burrow threw that touchdown pass after the whistle blew. Maybe we should have talked about that. Just bizarre. Hopefully they avoid stuff like that. But I also know that, let's face it, Tom Brady is a football junkie. He wouldn't be playing football at 44 going on 45 if he wasn't. And this seems like he doesn't want to give up doing football. So this seems like a compromise almost.
Yeah, he does not want to spend Sundays in the fall and winter with his family.
I'm not going to be that cynical about it, but he clearly doesn't want to be doing nothing but spending time with his family. And I get that to an extent. When you're as good as Tom Brady is at the whole football thing, specifically what would be required to be an analyst, because that's basically what Tom Brady does for a living. His 4.2 40 is his football IQ. Like, that is what distinguishes him from other quarterbacks. And so this translates probably pretty perfectly to that part of the job. The part that I'm unsure about is, can he talk on television? Like, it's not just about being a professional football mind. You also have to be a professional talker to be in broadcasting.
I think he's going to be okay. I've watched 2 episodes now, I think, of the documentary that's been being put out about Tom Brady and his Super Bowl seasons. And just it's a little bit different, obviously, than reacting to what's going on the field, but he can talk just fine. And assuming he's able to bring his football acumen into the booth with him, which I don't see any reason why he can't, I think he's going to be pretty good. I think it may take some time for him to truly warm into it. And during that time period, if he is not as good or better than Tony Romo, I'm going to be making fun of him a little bit for it, purely because of how much more money he's making than Tony Romo. Yeah. But I also am going to understand that, even some really good football minds have gone into the booth and it's taken some time. Some of them never really figure it out, how to be an analyst on the mic. But I don't really have any doubts about Tom Brady's ability to do it. I would love to see the audition tape if there was one, just out of sheer curiosity. But I think he's going to be fine when he does step in the booth in 2032 or whenever it'll be.
Yeah,
I said 3032. So
yeah, we'll be long gone.
Yeah, Corey, you've called football games as an analyst. Would you, I assume you've done it more times than Tom Brady has. Would you give him any pointers?
I would not give any pointers to Tom Brady. I mean, I'm not like an expert in it. I've done it a few times, and I loved doing it. It was a lot of fun, and I feel like I did a pretty good job with it, but I'm also more of a play-by-play guy. I didn't play football, so I have enough of an understanding of the game to be an analyst for a high school football game, but if you were to try to put me in the booth as an analyst for college, I would absolutely be out of my depth. At that level, I would have to be play-by-play or nothing else. So, Tom Brady's football acumen, like, to say it exceeds mine is like the understatement of the year.
It's the Captain Obvious statement of the year.
Right.
We're not just, no shade to Corey. That applies to everybody on this podcast and many others. So
that applies to just about everybody on this planet.
It's hard to find somebody that you would trust to know football better than
I can
Tom
probably
Brady.
count on one hand the number of people who I would put even on the same level as Tom Brady.
Yeah, fully agree. And this will be interesting because for pretty much Brady's entire career, like most franchise quarterbacks, he is an expert at talking a lot while saying nothing. But now he's going to have to actually say something. And I think I don't think that's going to be daunting because he says something all the time behind closed doors. When he's in meetings with his coaches and doing the offensive game plan, when he was on the phone with Josh McDaniels or whoever, or Byron Leftwich, they clearly talk about something. They talk about football. And that's just a matter of getting that into the broadcasting situation. There's obviously some differences because you have to have the timing right. You can't step on the play-by-play guy. But that's all stuff that you can work out through practice. Also, it's not like they just step into the booth week 1 of the preseason and say, all right, Tom, go ahead. They sit down, they have meetings, they work things out, they practice, they continue to practice. Like Troy Aikman took a little while to get it under, but he's become one of the best in the business.
Yeah,
but
I mean, Tony Romo has said he was doing a lot of practicing with Jim Nantz and by himself. So I don't have a problem with that. The one thing that I do notice a lot of times, not younger age-wise, but freshly out of football analysts sometimes have a little bit of difficulty being critical of players because these are still kind of your contemporaries in a lot of cases. These are guys that you've played with or played against over the past few seasons. And so you don't want to step on any toes or hurt any feelings or come across as disrespectful toward people that, viewers have been watching you play with and against. So I will be interested just to kind of see that aspect of it for Tom Brady, and does he feel like he has contemporaries? Because I think that if he's able to jump in and be critical of players right away, be like, okay, he's got a little bit of arrogance to him that he doesn't feel worried about that. And I'm not saying that in a bad way necessarily. I think that that'll be really interesting to see.
Well, and that was one thing that distinguished Tony Romo was his initial step into the booth. He was ripping Andy Dalton, man.
Oh, yeah.
Like that was brutal and glorious while he was just shredding Andy Dalton. I was like, damn. And the thing with Tony is that Tony took so much crap from fans throughout his career, calling him a choker ever since he fumbled that ball that you shouldn't even have been handling it. That should have been.
It took me a long time to kind of grow to appreciate that he actually was a really good football player.
Yeah, like it took me to the point where it was basically his last healthy season. Where that 2014 year, the Dez caught it year.
Yeah.
Like that, I was like, wow, I started to come around on him. We talked about this during the Denver game in 2013, where he lit it up and was going toe-to-toe with Peyton Manning. And I even joked about it on the chats. I said, it's 48-48. Romo has matched Peyton Manning throw for throw. And
he's going to be blamed for them losing.
They're going to lose this game, and they're going to blame Tony, especially because,
and that's exactly what happened.
Because he threw an interception that put the Broncos in field goal range to take a 3-point lead.
Yeah, never mind that they were only in this game because Tony Romo was matching Denver and Peyton Manning point for point.
Exactly.
MVP Peyton Manning.
Yes.
Yeah, dominant.
7 touchdowns in a game.
55 touchdowns in a season. Peyton Manning, yeah. So,
well over 5,000 passing yards in a season. Peyton Manning.
Yeah, and so when I saw, I was like, Romo's going to get a bunch of crap for this on the Talking Head shows tomorrow, isn't he? And I turn on the TV, and lo and behold, here we are. We're hating on Tony Romo after he lost the game 51-48. And I was just like, damn, this really is how it goes for this guy, isn't it? And then the next year, he was absolutely fantastic. I think he was the second-team All-Pro that year behind Rodgers.
I think so.
And then he played great football in the playoffs, especially in that Packers game. And then the Dez Claudette thing happened, and that was the end of that run. And then he had 2 banged-up years, and that was that. And
but even then, when he would play a few games in between injuries, he was still playing really good football.
Absolutely, yeah. But and then so I think he came into the booth with a little bit of Tony was obviously really enthusiastic and fun and upbeat, but
he's got a personality where you can kind of get away with ripping on people because
he's kind of got a little bit.
I think we watched that
thing, yeah.
He's not being completely serious.
Yeah, but he's also I can't imagine he doesn't harbor just a little bit of animosity towards the media and other outlets and other players who didn't get treated like that,
so.
That were worse than him, right? Like Andy Dalton, he probably looked at Andy Dalton and was like, this dude's been skating as this average-ass quarterback who's been carried by a really strong roster to, 5 straight playoff appearances, and he never gets any heat. Nah, I'm going to let him know. He's the reason they're losing this game. He's the reason they're not going to rally back and win because he's Andy Dalton and he's not good, and I'm going to let you know everything that he's not good at. And it was wonderful. And the thing is, with Tom, though, I do think that I don't think he's going to have any issue with that either because he's Tom Brady. He's, the Simpsons thing where it's everybody sucks but me. He doesn't run around saying that, but he's got to think it a little bit, right? He's so far ahead of everybody in terms of accomplishments and accolades that if Tom Brady says, hey, you messed something up, Tom Brady's right. Even when Tom Brady's wrong, OAN style here, he's right because he's Tom Brady. So that's the deal with that. So anything else to add about Tommy becoming a broadcaster?
I mean, that's what I was going to say. It's like Tom Brady, he might have an issue criticizing his contemporaries, but he doesn't have any contemporaries. There's nobody else in Tom Brady's class. So, he can just rip whoever he wants because that guy sucks. And like all of his teammates and current players in the NFL, like he's old enough to be their dad at this point. So, they should listen to Tom Brady.
Yeah, he's been in the NFL longer than some of these players have been alive, so that's
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
He is at that point now, so
he's going to be 45. So if you're 20 in the NFL right now, like that's old enough to be your dad.
Yep. That's true. So let's jump to some other topics real quick before we get to the topic that's not very serious in here. Let's talk a little NIL. That's been making some waves and some news both in football and basketball with regards to how NIL is being used almost as a substitute for a pay-for-play thing, and there's a lot of conversation about how this should be regulated. And so I guess it was Cory that put this in here.
Yeah, so there was some news that came out. I read a couple articles on ESPN this past week regarding – so there are some conference commissioners who are meeting with U.S. senators basically looking for Congress to pass some national legislation because state by state there are a lot of different regulations for how name, image, and likeness deals can work and can be pursued and can be offered to athletes, which, as far as the NCAA is concerned, it can give certain colleges an advantage because some states are a little bit more loose with their regulations. Additionally, this week there was like some new guidance passed by the NCAA that like defines what constitutes a booster. That side of things I don't necessarily think that we need to touch on quite as much because I don't even really quite understand how they were defining a booster or if it was defined and what the new definition is and even like what the result of that will be. But I'm interested to kind of have us discuss a little bit what we think some regulations should be for how NIL deals work and can be offered. And I guess I'll kind of go first and just share my initial thoughts, which there definitely needs to be some regulations because there's been concern that some boosters, some corporate sponsors are offering money to athletes before they make a decision on what school they're going to go and trying to guide them toward a school. And I don't think that is right. First and foremost, I think that athletes should be able to do whatever the hell they want to do as far as this goes. If somebody offers you money, take it. I don't think that there should be any punishment levied on an athlete based on any of that. I don't think that there should have ever been punishments on athletes who received compensation before it was technically allowed. I think that the penalty should have been imposed on the people giving the money. Now, I don't know how that happens because the NCAA doesn't have control over them. They do have control over the athletes, and so that's who they punished. But the athletes aren't doing anything wrong here, in my opinion. The athletes don't have money. In a lot of cases, their families don't have a lot of money. They're kind of desperate. So can you really blame them for taking whatever is going to be handed to them? A lot of them really need it. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And so in the same way, there has to be some regulations, but it needs to be with punishments that be levied against the boosters, against the sponsors who would be paying the athletes, not on the athletes themselves.
I don't think I don't feel like this is that big of an issue just because this type of stuff has been going on for decades, but only now is it above board. Eric Dickerson and his Pontiac Trans Am would like a word about that. That was in 1983 or something like that. It's been a little while. So like I in terms of like a current athlete at one school being offered a bunch of money to transfer to another school, I think that's fine as well, because the kid should go to the highest bidder. If for whatever ridiculous reason that the school can't just cut the players a check, because we know they got the money lying around, but they for some reason can't cut the players a check, then if I'm an athlete and I'm playing this, an example, football, playing this dangerous sport where my career could end in an instant with some horrible injury, like, y'all need to pay up. So, yeah, you should definitely go get the most money possible.
I guess I just don't like the idea that an athlete would need to go to a specific school to get that money. But maybe I'm being naive when I say that.
Well, he shouldn't have to, but
maybe I don't know. Maybe like that's just how the market is going to have to work.
That's how all markets work, right? Like, but at you guys' jobs, if somebody called you and said, "Hey, we'll quadruple your salary to do the same job," you'd be like, "Yeah, when can I start? How about Monday?" Right?
Yeah.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And then the other issue I have is any mention of the NCAA with this, y'all can just get on up out of here. The NCAA they caused this problem like 100 some years ago now. So the NCAA's existence just makes it worse, right? Like they're just in the way, and they make up stuff like, oh, well, it's a student athlete. Like, no, these are employees of the school. You recruited them to come here to perform for you, and then you're like, oh, well, they'll just do it for free because we say so. Like that's those times are long gone. So I think the NCAA needs to do itself a favor and dissolve. To be honest, just get out of here.
That would be my biggest one, is for the NCAA just to stop being.
Yeah, but that's the NCAA has no interest in self-immolating because they make a lot of money doing it, and those guys that get in on the grift would have to find real jobs. So I think that the issue here is always going to be the people that are clamoring hardest for regulation on NIL and things like that are the ones that didn't want it in the first place. Like the ones that believe that the entire basis of college athletics has to be that the student athletes don't get paid. And they see this going on where these kids are allowed to make money, and they see the obvious pitfalls that come with it as boosters dole out money, basically become pay for play. And the issue is that if you want something to work, you can't just have the people that hate this regulating it, because their idea is to just get rid of it. But they can't get rid of it because the Supreme Court already said that it's unconstitutional to do so on a 9-0 vote. So you're not overturning that one when you got Clarence Thomas working against you and on the side of the labor. You're probably messing up pretty badly. Yeah. That's not going to swing back the other way. If that grumpy asshole can come up, and sit there and get on your ass about something instead of just sleeping through the depositions, then you're going to get something. But that's just my thoughts. The problem is that I don't see any realistic way you can stop that type of pay for play. But I also don't care. Like, if you're telling me that the only way your system can operate with quote-unquote integrity is by being completely unethical, then your entire system sucks, and I don't really care about it anymore. Like, the infrastructure of college sports is built on something that was deemed unconstitutional. Therefore, it probably shouldn't exist at all. So the fact that this is being allowed to happen, they need to deal with it. Like, there's no regulation that's going to say, oh, pinky promise, I'm not actually getting this NIL money to come here. This is something unrelated to my presence on this college campus to play basketball or football. Give me a break. That's never going to be a thing. Because who's to stop anybody from offering money? And if you say, oh, well, boosters can't do it, well, then the boosters will get somebody else. There's a whole bunch of people that are perfectly happy to line up and say, hey, you cut me in on this, I'll cut this kid a deal at the local tire factory and give him $1,000 to cut a commercial. And guess what? Problem solved. Booster gets the kid to come to the school, kid gets the money, and this other guy gets paid to be the go-between, and the NCAA can't get their hands on any of it. So that it's just, I don't see how that's possible without broadly expanding the NCAA and basically turning this into like a war on drugs type of situation. And the NCAA doesn't have the legal backing or the capital to do that. So it's just not going to work.
And also, like, say the players are getting paid a lot of money. You mean to tell me that Bryant-Denny Stadium isn't going to be packed with 110,000 people every Saturday because the players are getting paid now? Doesn't that sound absurd?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what it sounds like to me is that certain schools that could afford fancy facilities or hire awesome coaches, all of which requires money.
You mean paying Dabo Sweeney $100 million? They can't spare a couple extra dollars to pay the players.
Well, they want to pay him because he's good, right? And Dabo makes good players come to Clemson. And Nick Saban makes good players come to Alabama. So they pay them. That's kind of an indirect pay-for-play scheme, in my opinion. The amount of money that you are willing to spend to make your football program go is just the same as if you spent that money giving it to athletes. What's the difference? Because guess what? Kids aren't going to come to Alabama if Nick Saban's not there, and Nick Saban's not going to be there if you're not going to pay him $10 million a year.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, why are college athletes not getting paid anything while their coaches are making millions? Meanwhile, in the NFL, the players make a lot more than the coaches do in most cases.
Because it's market value. The NCAA is an anti-free market governing system. That's what it is. And you can be for that, I guess, but it goes in contrast with everything else that the same people that love the NCAA's regulations on these kids, they claim to stand for free market capitalism, but when it comes to young college athletes, suddenly it's a problem. There's a disconnect there. I wonder what the disconnect could be. I don't know. But we'll move on to something.
I'll just rub the back of my hand and then.
Yeah, see? Yeah. Yep. So we'll move on to something a little less serious. Another topic. Cory participated in DeMatha's faculty versus seniors basketball game. I believe that was on Tuesday last week? It was
on Thursday.
Thursday, okay.
Yeah.
And I got to watch the first half. I didn't watch the taped version of the second half, but
we just got that up today.
Yeah, the stream cut out around halftime, but I caught the first half, and I went into it thinking, all right, I'm going to pull for the teachers. And then y'all came out in a 2-3 zone to start the game in basically a pickup basketball game, and I was just like, were y'all sitting in the teacher's lounge just like rubbing your hands together, evil genius stuff, like we're going to hit these kids with a 2-3 zone?
No, we literally, Gang gave us the game plan, as we were getting ready to go on the court. David Gang, he's one of our math teachers. He played for the team back in, the mid-2000s. He coached the freshman team most recently. That was a few years ago. But yeah,
mid-2000s, that's when I was there.
Yeah, so I think he graduated in 05. But,
that was my first year.
Yeah, but yeah, so he was the coach, old. And literally as the starters are walking on the court, he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna start with a 2-3 zone," and I mean, part of that is just traditionally the teachers play a 2-3 zone because the kids are faster than the teachers.
You don't need to get in the gym.
Teachers can't play one-on-one against these kids. The basketball players are not allowed to play for the seniors, but the football players can. The track athletes can and do. Most of them are track and football players. They're fast.
So cowardly.
Okay, get in the gym, right?
They're kids.
Yeah,
y'all are grown-ass men. Come on,
yeah, y'all are grown men. What's the problem?
I was glad he played because I could not run. I could not run at all on Thursday.
Why couldn't you run? You're a runner.
You coach cross country and you can't run
because I had a bruised glute from 2 days earlier.
How'd you?
What in the world?
So
he's got a bad can. He's like Dwight Howard.
Oh,
Dwight Howard,
jeez.
yeah.
You and Dwight Howard. What are y'all doing? Is there something salacious we need to know about?
Hopefully not.
No,
Getting
so
married in 2
so
months.
we, so we didn't just play basketball this year. Usually basketball is the only faculty versus senior competition, but this year on Tuesday we did dodgeball and on Wednesday we did handball. So Tuesday with dodgeball, we did a best of 5 series. We lost the first game. We won the second game, and the kids, like all the kids who were watching, stormed the court. We win the third game, and on the last play of the third game, one of the seniors gets hit by 2 balls like simultaneously in the face. His glasses fly off. One of his lenses pops out of the glasses, and just in general, I was worried, but especially because he's one of my cross country athletes. So I'm like,
You threw a ball at him.
I did not. It wasn't one of. Neither of them was
You
mine.
plural
Well,
ball
yes.
threw a ball at him.
Yes.
Like, oh, he got hit by a ball that we threw.
Well, no. So the problem was he ended up hit on the ground, and his glasses and his lens are laying there, and the kids are storming the court. So I'm rushing over to try and protect the glasses, stop them from shattering his lens into a billion pieces,
Or from trampling their
or from trampling him.
classmate.
On my way over, this big kid just burls into me. He's got to be on the football team. If he's not, there's a problem. He needs to be. He runs into me and knocks me flat on my ass, and I landed right on my tailbone. So that wasn't great.
Got to keep your head on a swivel.
So is it a bruised tailbone or a blue?
No,
bruised
it was the muscle.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, and then the next day I ended up re-cracking my rib while playing handball.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I was double injured for the basketball game.
Can we get you a traction suit or something?
Okay, let me ask you this.
It's always injuries.
So you got a bruised can and you've got a re-injured rib,
Yes.
and you still decide to play ball?
Yeah, they
I
needed
give
me,
you
'cause
some
everybody else.
credit for that. Yeah,
Everybody else had dropped out. We had 2 people out with COVID, and we had somebody else.
I will say,
and we had a guy who he ruptured his Achilles on Monday playing pickup basketball.
Well, yeah, that's
Good grief.
Yeah.
my goodness.
So they kind of needed an extra body out there. I was like, you know what? I can at least give you a few minutes of effort and play a little bit of zone defense. And if
Yeah.
I get an open look,
play
I'll
a
take
little
the
bit
shot.
of zone defense. Yeah, just stand in this general area, and if it's near
You have
put
one
your hands
healthy
up.
glute and
Oh my god.
23 healthy ribs. You're good to go.
So I took 2 shots in the game. The first one missed very ugly.
I didn't.
It,
It looked like you were kind of caught in between there.
Well, I was caught a little bit in between, but also because of the rib, I kind of undershot it.
Yeah, you
I was
did,
kind of
yeah.
nervous about it, but it ended up not hurting. So I was mostly just angry and embarrassed. I missed as
know.
badly as I did.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So then I got another chance later, and I shot a 3, and I did almost make that one.
Yeah, back
but
iron, yeah.
that one I felt it in the rib, and I was like, damn it.
Yeah, there's a rainbow shot on that one. I was like, damn. I was like, that might have gone in. It was funny. Were the kids that were calling the game on the broadcast, are they your students?
So they are in video broadcast, but they're in Matt Revkin's section.
Okay, because it seemed like, because they're like, I bet Mr. Puffett's going to make the next shot. I'm like,
Well, I think one of them said that, but the other one wasn't
he
buying
wasn't
it.
feeling it. Yeah. I was like, well, based on that first shot, I can see why. But I was like, are these guys, is this one kid trying to kiss some ass here? Is that what's
No.
going on? Okay, so he's not. But
They
yeah,
weren't getting graded for it. They asked me if they could do it, so it was completely extra. And
Yeah. So and then Steven, who was in our fantasy league,
yeah,
got
Steven
in the game.
made
He made a putback layup, but man, he looked smoked out there, man. Lazy defense, and he only played a few minutes from what I saw. And
he played less than I did.
He looked like he was huffing and puffing.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
just totally
Because
gassed.
having babies, you
Yeah.
gotta
I
get
probably
rid of the dad bod.
So we played 8-minute quarters. I probably played a good 6 or 7 minutes
played quite a bit in the first half, yeah.
bridging the first and the second quarters.
Yeah.
I probably only played 3 minutes in the second
Yeah,
half.
like I said, I couldn't see that. I saw the first half. I saw your 2 missed shots. I saw the turnover, which again, from the angle, it was so far away. I could vaguely tell it was you because I knew what number you were wearing.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, Cory just dribbled into huge traffic.
That
I
was-
feel like he wouldn't have done that unless he thought something else was going to happen.
Well, somebody, one of my teammates, I think it was John Rogers, waved me around. He was trying to set a screen for me.
Yeah.
But then both defenders collapsed on me.
they blitzed you.
And I only knew about 2 of them. I guess there was a third one.
There was a third guy, yeah.
Because I saw Rogers kind of cut back, and his defender was on me. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and toss it back. But part of the problem was all of the students, like, there was no space on the sideline. They were like right there. So I think I like hit it against one of the students standing on the sideline as I was trying to like put it up over.
So
I was trying to do like a Larry Bird pass.
Like 500.
Yeah, I was trying to do like a Larry Bird pass.
Oh my God.
But I like
you are not Larry Legends.
There was a lot bad about this game for me. I did not play well. I'm not happy about it, especially because the last time I played in this game, I scored 4 points to help us win in overtime. Like, I scored 4 points in overtime to help us win against the seniors.
Oh, it was just not your day apparently. But what was the final score?
It was like 59-57 in overtime.
Yeah.
So you got to watch the last few seconds.
Because y'all were starting to get your ass whooped a little bit at the end of the first half.
It was the last few seconds. We had it tied with 3 seconds, and we had the ball, so we inbound it. But the guy like passes it backward, and one of the defenders, like one of the seniors, like stole it and laid it up to win at the buzzer.
Jeez, well, that's no good. Yeah, I did.
So y'all lost.
So we lost.
The youngins found a way. Like at the end of the first half, they were hitting some jumpers. They had solved your little 2-3 zone, and they were finding some open spots. I was proud of them. I was like, good for y'all.
They had Braden Gross, who he was like one of the last cuts for the varsity team this year, and I think he was, he took that personal. I think he channeled a little bit of Michael Jordan in this game because he was hitting if you watch the second half, he was hitting like every floater he took in the second half. It was ridiculous. Everything was falling.
Yeah, I just see, I'm watching, suddenly it's a transition opportunity. I see this big ass teacher just flying through the air trying to throw down a dunk, and I was like, who the hell is that? And it's like, oh, Mr. Tate. I was like, Mr. Tate. I was like, oh, Kenny Tate. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot that he works there. Yeah. I was like, my goodness, this 2-3 zone. Yeah.
And then Scott Sicko was just a dog down there trying to rebound. So
he was
Scott Sicko, he briefly played tight end for the Cowboys. I think he only appeared in a couple preseason games, but he was a legit football player.
Yeah. All right. Well,
it was fun. Not the result that we wanted, and certainly not the game that I wanted to have for myself, but it was fun.
Yeah, better luck next year, I guess. Hopefully next year you'll be
y'all
more
gotta
healthy.
Practice.
Yeah, get in the gym.
Yeah, maybe drink some milk or something. So,
get that calcium up. Yeah.
Yeah, breaking ribs, playing a non-contact sport.
It is a little nerve-wracking though that we couldn't win this year against a group of seniors that we have not had a single WCAC champion in any of our sports this year.
Oh, jeez.
Any of them at all?
Cross country and tennis have had the most successful seasons so far. Both finished second. That's the best we've done so far. Now, we do still have track left for as far as WCAC championship events. But that's it.
Okay. Well, who coaches
falling off the rows
that
there?
team?
Not me.
Just a bunch of failures at DeMatha. I have to rehire.
Back when I was at DeMatha, we used to win all the time. So,
yes. It was consistent winning.
Yeah, back in my day.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what y'all are doing. There's some damn teachers there that can't get those kids in shape.
No.
Jeez.
All right, so let's move on to some baseball before we get to the NBA. So the Orioles have played pretty well lately. 6-4 in their last 10. One series against the Red Sox and the Royals, and they had a split with the Twins. Now, none of those teams are particularly good, but neither are the Orioles. So, if you're going to be a bad team, you got to beat the worst teams, and that's what the Orioles did. So, other news, Adley Rutschman is an imminent Major League Baseball player, probably within the next week or so. He's been on a quote-unquote rehab assignment for the last couple of weeks. He started off, I think, in Aberdeen.
Yeah.
And then he's quickly moved up to Norfolk, and I imagine that he'll be there for a few minutes, and then he'll probably
within the next 10
debut.
days.
Yeah, so
yeah,
that's obviously exciting for the Orioles.
Yeah, Norfolk has a home series this week against somebody. I don't know. But then they go on the road starting next Tuesday. So they're not going to send Adley on the road probably. So it looks like early next week versus the New York Yankees. So
trial by fire.
I mean,
your pitching's not that good.
Our pitching is number 2 in baseball right now.
Yeah. The Orioles pitching looks good too. It's a mirage.
Yeah. The Orioles, The Orioles pitchers are just guys who got voted off the island of misfit toys, right? Like this, who are these people pitching great? So yeah, rooting for Adley. I want to go to his first game so bad, but like we don't know when it is, so they need to hurry up and tell us so the game can be sold out randomly.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. So another fun fact. The Orioles will be playing at Busch Stadium for the first time since 2003.
How has that happened?
I don't know. I think that
You're supposed to play against every other team like every 3 years and
then,
swap
home
home
road.
series. So
Yeah,
every
so-
6 years you'd be in an opposing interleague ballpark.
Yeah, so you would think that they would have been there twice since 2003 until
Yeah.
this one. So I
Yeah.
don't
Well,
know.
apparently it didn't work out in the rotation, and they were supposed to go to St. Louis in 2020, but 2020 happened, so they finally got back to it this year.
That still doesn't explain like why they hadn't gone there at least once between 2003 and 2020.
Well, there was an imbalance in the number of teams in each league
Yeah, they used
until
16.
2013.
Oh yeah.
So that creates.
And they didn't have interleague play that often.
Right.
So, stuff like that
Interesting.
was why.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go.
Well, it'll
this
happen
be the
every
Orioles?
other year going forward. It seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
with the
so it'll
new
be every other year
schedule
going forward. But
that
the
they're
Orioles, this
expecting.
is their first time playing at this Busch Stadium, because in 2003 it was,
The old Busch
at the
Stadium.
time, it was the second Busch Stadium. So, that'll be pretty cool, I guess.
All right, well, tell us about your Yankees, Corey, because they're actually not being a disappointment so far.
They're the best team in baseball right now by half a game ahead of the LA Dodgers, which just is shocking considering how rough the very start of the season was for them. I mean, they won the first game, but then they struggled a little bit during that first week. But right now they're like 20-8, I believe. The Dodgers are 19-8, and that despite the fact that hitting wise, the Yankees are kind of so-so in some areas. They don't have any player on the roster with a batting average over 300 except for one player who only has 5 at-bats on the season. So throw that out. As a team, they're 10th in batting average, but they're 5th in OPS. They've got, I believe, a top 5 slugging percentage. The real surprise so far has been the pitching. Both on the team level, they're second in ERA, as I just mentioned. They're also 4th in WHIP and 4th in opposing batting average. But individually, they've got some really good pitchers, including the starting rotation. Nestor Cortez, in particular, has been a bit of an aberration for us. He's got a 1.41 ERA. His WHIP is under 1. I believe I think he's got like the 6th best WHIP out of all starting pitchers right now, or something like that. He's really pitching well. Yesterday he had a no-hitter going into the 7th inning. Of course, it took him 94 pitches, so that was as far as he really went yesterday. But that was against the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays have a pretty good offense, and he no-hit them for 7 innings. Kid's really playing well. He had one bad start. I'm sorry, it wasn't the Blue Jays yesterday. It was the Rangers. So never mind on the good.
The other blue team.
Yeah, the other blue team. But he's only had like one bad start so far this season. And even then, he still has his ERA under 1.5. So Yankees are playing well. I'm having fun watching them. Aaron Judge is doing well. He's got the highest WAR on the team at like 1.6 or something like that. I think he's definitely in the top 30 in Major League Baseball. I don't remember exactly where in the top 30 he is though, but he's been playing well. Not as good as Manny Machado though, because Manny Machado has been raking. His WAR of 2.6 is 0.4 higher than anybody else in baseball. That's a pretty big gap.
Especially this.
Wonder
early
who
in the
drafted
year.
him in our fantasy league. Oh, right, that was me.
Well, Evan's whole team is just crushing him.
Evan, it's the year of the Evan maybe in fantasy sports. He won the football. Maybe he's gonna come for the baseball this year.
I mean, there's a
think
lot of
that's it.
baseball left,
That's true.
but
There is.
That's true.
yeah.
But your team is raking.
I had like I had 3 whole days of pitcher starts rinsed off the map last week. Just Nobody pitched at all.
You didn't even need them though.
I mean, yeah, but like, I still want my guys to play, and nobody was playing.
So,
I picked up Adley Rutschman this week.
yeah, you did. You spent $17 in Fab.
So,
I mean, we never spend it, so let's
Yeah.
be real. Like,
But nobody else even bid on him.
you're giving me a hard time about spending fake money.
Yes, I am.
hey man, Corey gave me a hard time for spending $30 on Jordan Howard in 2016, and well,
That worked out.
yes, it did.
Yeah.
So don't be hating. So
You should have bid 18.
yeah, maybe nobody else bid anything, but that's
I wanted to get the guy.
fortune
So I got
favors the brave.
Mm-hmm.
Crypto.com.
Always. Always.
Don't buy crypto. So we got some other tidbits from Major League Baseball. Baseball will be returning to London in 2023. The leading candidate for that game would be Cardinals Cubs, which, come on, man.
Well, they were supposed to play in 2020, but then 2020 happened.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main reason why they're the leading candidate. In 2019, it was Yankees Red Sox, biggest American League rivalry, arguably. So why not arguably the biggest NL rivalry, at least historically?
Well, they sent them a gong show that one time the Yankees Red Sox went out there.
Well,
Like,
both
oh
games were
my
pretty
God.
high scoring, but good God, the first inning
First
of
one
that
was
first game,
ridiculous. That was nuts.
the first inning was an hour long.
Yeah.
I literally thought that I was going to be sitting in front of that TV for 9 hours watching one baseball
9
game.
hours?
Yeah, it was.
I mean,
It was like the ball was flying out of that stadium. Like there is no air resistance anywhere in there.
a home run
Something.
derby, yeah.
The other issue is that because of the different air resistance in there, like the baseball was not cutting. If you were trying to throw a
Yeah.
curveball, if you're trying to throw a slider, fastball was really easy to diagnose. Like, so the hitters were just seeing it so much better than they've ever seen it in any other stadium ever.
Yeah, we've talked about it on this podcast.
It was a home run
before,
derby in a game.
Is that we talk about
Yes.
Coors Field and the ball flying out of there, but again, a big part of the advantages or a big part of the disadvantage for the pitchers is their pitches don't move as much because
There's not as much air for the laces to latch onto
it
and
needs
pull
that
itself
to
to the
cut.
side.
So
Yep.
you get a straighter pitch, and straight pitches and major league hitters are bad combination for pitchers.
Especially a slower, straighter pitch.
Oh yeah, but even ask Kevin Gausman, you throw 97 straight as a string, it flies out of the park. So
oh my goodness. Kevin Gausman give himself a whiplash throwing those meatballs on 0-2.
pumping heat, and then it just goes out of the park faster.
Right.
Because these
Yeah.
are grown ass men who know how to hit baseballs for a living, professional ball hitters, and they send them pretty far.
Yep. So after the 2023 series in London, they're also planning to have series there in 2024 and 2026. And like all of the articles I was reading just said that London games to return 2023, 2024, and 2026. I'm like, where is 2025? And I had to like look for it because none of the authors of these articles thought that anybody reading them would be wondering, what about 2025? Why
There's
not
a
that
year
year?
missing, yeah.
But turns out that that's because the Dodgers are in talks to potentially play games in Paris in 2025. But that's like a separate deal from Major League Baseball's with London.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I assumed it was the same deal, but they were just going to play in London.
Yeah, no, it's not quite like the NFL's like international series where they, now have games scheduled for London and Mexico City and now Munich, Germany.
Okay. I think this is great for baseball. I think it's important to, try to grow the sport internationally.
I mean, if we're
wish
going
they
to
would
call
make-
the championship the World Series, like we should make sure that we are bringing in people from around the world and pushing the sport out into the world.
I heard so much crap from people when I was in college. Like, are you going to call yourself the world champion if only American teams can play? I'm like, well, there's one Canadian team. So
North American.
It used to be two.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did used to be two. Just like there used to be two NBA teams in Canada.
Now there's not.
Yeah. So, I think this is great for baseball. More people watching baseball, more people playing baseball. It's good for everybody all around.
Yup.
I do wish baseball did more effort made more effort to get more people watching and playing baseball in inner city communities. But at least they're doing something.
Yep, agreed on all fronts. Let's jump to the NBA, which has been the meat of our show for the past few weeks as the playoffs have gotten underway. We'll start in the Eastern Conference, where the Heat and the Sixers are tied 2-2 after Philly was able to answer back. That they fell behind 2-0, losing the first two games in Miami. Joel Embiid returned to the lineup in Game 3, and is Joel Embiid, so obviously that made a difference. And the Sixers were able to win Games 3 and 4. Notably, Game 4 was an impressive victory because James Harden was great, which is something that has been difficult to say for most of this year.
Especially since he's been in Philly.
Yeah, and he got to the hoop a lot. He got to the free throw line a lot. He made his threes. He looked a little bit vintage. Looked really good. And
Brian Windhorst described James Harden as reanimated. So apparently he came back to life.
yes, he was definitely not a zombie. He was a living, breathing basketball player who was playing quite well, and it helped his team tie up a series. That Game 5 is being played as we speak. There in the first quarter, the Heat have gotten off to a good start. They're up 25-14, but it is early yet. I think the Heat still win this series, and it's not just because they're up 11 points in Game 5. They still have home court advantage. I feel like the big game from James Harden is probably a bit more of an aberration at this point than a sign of things to come. I don't think you can look at his one good performance, it's probably the best performance he's had in months, and say, oh yeah, he's back. Bingo, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, he had some good games early in the season for Brooklyn, but those kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah, he was riding the struggle bus early, and then he kind of found something, at least getting back to the free throw line. But just aside from the stats, also just watching him play, the ability to get to the hoop seemed to disappear, especially when he got to Philly. The consistency hitting the outside shots wasn't there. The only thing he really had was he could draw fouls still, and obviously he's still a tremendous passer, so he does have some value, but it's difficult because Philly traded for him probably hoping he would be their second best player, and a lot of nights he plays like he's their third best player, and while Tyrese Maxey is great, they need him then to elevate to be the second best player, and that's a lot to ask of a 22-year-old young player to say, hey, I need you to be the number 2 star on a championship contender. It's just a little bit much. So
yeah,
I think that the Heat have a better overall team. They got some interesting things going on there too. They paid Duncan Robinson a whole bunch of money, and they're not playing him at all in this series. And that went on in Game 4, despite the fact that nobody could hit an outside shot, and Duncan Robinson's entire reason for existing in the NBA is he's a great shooter. And
Not because of his name?
Nope, not because of his name. He's not related to the Admiral. He's white. So there's that.
But he seems like he was named after Tim Duncan and David Robinson.
Well, he wasn't, because neither of those guys are white. So, anyway, the Heat, I still think have the better team. Tyler Hero had a rough game in game 3 and 4, but mostly Game 4. He was terrible, but that's not something you come to expect. The only guy that showed up for the Heat in Game 4 was Jimmy Butler, and he was great. But I think you're going to see the role players be better at home, and since Miami has 2 out of 3 at home, I think they're going to put it together and win that series. If they don't win one in Philly, it's not the end of the world because they don't have to. Like, that's the way it works. You get 4 at home, you only have to win those 4. So they're in a good spot, I think, despite the fact that, I'm impressed with Philly for battling back. I'm impressed with Joel Embiid, obviously, for coming back from a broken face and still playing with a torn ligament in his thumb to come back. And he wasn't quite the same guy, but how can you expect him to be? But his presence alone made that team so much better, as you would expect from an MVP candidate. So we'll jump to a really exciting series that could have been over yesterday if not for the resurgence of Big Al Horford, who saved the Celtics from going down 3-1 against the Bucks. Now that series is tied 2-2. The Celtics shot 16 of 19 from the field in the fourth quarter to rally back after they were trailing at certain points, I believe, by double digits in the late third quarter. I think they went to the fourth down 7, but it was just a barrage in the fourth quarter. Al Horford was playing great. Jason Tatum got it going. He made some big shots. And it felt like Milwaukee's other guys besides Giannis, this is something that happens with the Bucks sometimes, is you've got good players, but man, there's some inconsistent players too. Like Drew Holiday is always going to give you excellent perimeter defense, and he at times can be brilliant offensively, but there are other times where he can't buy a shot. And there are times where he can't even make a free throw. And there are times where he commits too many fouls and he gets a little bit ahead of himself and he turns the ball over. Well, Game 4 was one of those games for him. And Bobby Portis hasn't really been found this series when he was tremendous for them last year and a big part of the reason why they won the championship. And
the guy with the eyes.
Yes, that's right. And, Grayson Allen, nobody on this podcast cares for him, but he has at times been an effective outside shooter for this team. He wasn't a factor in Game 4 either. Pat Connaughton, Orioles legend, has also been a guy that they've relied on for some energy and some three-point shooting. And it's just been a little bit of a struggle. Chris Middleton's absence becomes so much more evident when these other guys don't perform. Because you can get away with not having him out there if Drew Holiday's on his game. But if he's not, then it's entirely incumbent on Giannis to carry the offense while also having to be the best defender on the floor. And Boston has seemingly taken a tack to just run him out of gas. Like, you can't do everything all the time and expect to be completely fresh in the fourth quarter, because normally in the fourth quarter, that's when Giannis kills you. He's just relentless. You're a little bit fatigued, but he's still going strong. He's driving to the hoop. He's barreling into you. Even if he's getting called for fouls, even if he's not making free throws, that heavy toll that his game puts on opponents just destroys you. And if you're able to take his legs from him before it gets to that point, you've effectively neutralized him in the fourth quarter. And Giannis, unfortunately, has no choice but to go all out when the other guys aren't performing. He can't take possessions off. He can't be sort of a decoy ever. It's always got to be him. And if that's the case, then it's hard to see them winning this series at this point. I mean, they had home court advantage. They should have lost probably Game 3 as well. And they could easily be down 3-1 in this series going back to Boston for Game 5. Instead, it's 2-2. But this is, again, home court advantage is going to matter here. It felt like Boston was a little bit shook in Game 1, didn't quite know what to expect. But since then, they've been the better team each of the last 3 games. And if that trend continues, Milwaukee's title defense is going to end prematurely.
Where is Robert Williams in terms of his recovery?
Well, he played the
Timelord.
The Timelord played the first 3 games of this series, and he came back at the end of the Nets series.
He missed Game 4, though, right?
He missed yesterday's game, yes.
Yeah.
And so he was a little bit rusty when he was on the floor. And honestly, I feel like playing on that injury is really, to pun intended here, is a ticking time bomb. I mean, he's a guy with a torn meniscus, and we've seen players historically when they've rushed back from that injury, instead of taking the full recovery time or even potentially having surgery, that damage becomes irreparable. And I hope that's not happening to him, because he's amazing. Like, he's a really talented, really athletic young player. But I feel like you're seeing some of the effects of he's got to get back in here because we need him to make a postseason run. And so he's missing playoff games now due to knee soreness. That's not something you want to hear. But nevertheless, with Al Horford playing as brilliantly as he played, it didn't matter in Game 4. But if they want to win the title when they have to play a Phoenix or a Golden State or whoever comes out of the West, they're going to need him to be able to play all 7 and to be effective. And I think that injury continuing to linger is a little bit of a concern.
Well, yeah, I mean, is he going to play tomorrow or Thursday, whenever the next game is?
I do not know. I would assume they definitely want him back. They're desperate to have him back because, again, I don't think 35-year-old Al Horford is going to give you the game that he gave you again. But, I mean, it's still a game-time decision in all likelihood, and it's a pivotal Game 5. I mean, yes, you just took back home court advantage, but it's still 2-2. Job's not finished. You still need to win 2 games, and the other team only needs to win 2 games as well.
Yep.
So having this guy potentially missing for Game 5, actually I just got the report that he's been ruled out for Game 5 as well, so he won't be there. So Boston's going to have all hands on deck to maintain the home court advantage that they just won back. So like this series is really interesting just because there's a bit of an attrition game going on here where Milwaukee's missing their second best player, and that didn't seem to matter in Game 1. It didn't seem to matter in Game 3, but now with Giannis potentially being targeted to be a guy that's going to get burnt out, it could loom large, but it becomes a lot easier to manage if the Time Lord's not there. If he's not out there being a great rim protector, and if Al Horford's not scoring 35 points on a ridiculous shooting clip, then suddenly the Celtics are a lot more beatable. So let's hop to the Western Conference, which has been certainly exciting. No shortage of drama. Let's start with the Suns Mavericks, which, like the other 2 series, is tied 2-2. And
nobody wants to win in 5.
Nope. Nobody. We don't do 5.
Much less in
series
4.
Here.
No Suns in 4.
No Suns in 4 this time. So again, just like the Miami Heat, the Suns win Game 1 and 2 in pretty convincing fashion.
It's looking like Suns in 4.
Yeah. The difference is Games 3 and 4 didn't feature a return of a star to help the Mavericks. The Mavericks just played better. Namely, Luka Doncic played better, at least defensively, after he was mercilessly hunted in pick and rolls at the end of Game 2 and was just getting absolutely cooked. He seemingly, Jason Kidd said he needs to step up and be a participant on defense. And to Luka's credit, he definitely has played better, or definitely played better in the 2 home games. And in Game 4, the other guys really stepped up big time, hit just a ton of threes in the first half, and they kind of maintained that. And a big part of the reason why the Mavericks got back in the series is Chris Paul was awful in Game 3, and he was non-existent in Game 4. Like, he fouled out with 9 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and was basically on the bench with foul trouble pretty much the entire game.
Well, yeah, and I saw after he fouled out, like he was like shouting at a fan who had been berating some of his family. Well, it wasn't like on Mother's Day, and this fan was like berating his mother and his wife.
Yeah, there was apparently some unwanted contact as well. I believe the phrase was used was unwanted hugs, which why are you doing that? So obviously Paul was rightfully irate at the fact that this was going down. I had
read that the fan in question had been imbibing in some adult beverages.
Not a surprise there. Apparently it was also they're playing a game where, we're going to keep poking you until you annoy the crap out of me, and, just nonsense like that.
But why are you doing that with somebody that you don't know?
It's a good question. Fan
don't
behavior
ask me. I don't know.
Isn't always the best, and that was made clear here. We hope that fan has been permanently barred from attending, because this is ridiculous.
I hope so.
But back to the basketball. I think that this series just got really interesting, because I know the Suns still have home court, but it feels like the Suns have been a little bit vulnerable in games that weren't Game 1s in their first 2 series. Like, they won Game 1 against the Pelicans, they cruised. But then they lost Game 2. And then in Game 5, it was sort of touch and go. I feel like, that first game, you come out, fans are going nuts, and you ride that energy and you just blitz them. And they're like, okay, we'll just regroup for Game 2 and try our best to get home court advantage there. But in Game 5, the Mavericks are riding just as high as you are. Like, you're going to get energized by your home court, but they're energized by the fact that, hey, y'all thought the series was probably in the bag, and now it's 2-2.
Yep.
And we're coming for your ass. And so I think the Mavericks have a little bit of that swagger. They've got the best player in the series, and we've talked about this. Best player in the series can win you any game at any time. It might not win you the series, but you only have to win 2 more. If he gets you 1, now you're 1 away, and that 1 away could easily be played in Game 6 in Dallas if the Suns aren't careful here.
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta figure the Suns are going to win, because I think the Suns are still the better team. And they were the better team all season, and I feel like there are some drawbacks for the Luka-centric offense that the Mavericks run. and I think it does affect his teammates in a negative way when they share the floor with him. But if they're just going to rain threes again, which is entirely possible, then this game could be a toss-up. And if this game's a toss-up, then the series is a toss-up as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I agree with that.
So let's get to the least exciting series on paper, but the most obnoxious series in the headlines. The Golden State Warriors versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Golden State took a 3-1 lead last night despite a horrible effort by them.
You said that they missed their first 12 shots from three?
15.
15?
Just 15.
Yes, 0 of 15 from
Good
3 to start the
Lord.
game.
Sounds like me out there.
And they had, I believe,
Brick City.
11 turnovers in the first half. They just, terrible
I don't even know
start.
if I could miss 15 threes in a row.
Well, if you're being guarded by NBA guys, you probably could. But put me in an open gym, I'll make 1 out of 15, I'm sure. But I think that Golden State knew that Ja Morant would be out for this game. Ja Morant's probably not going to play again in this series. We'll get to that.
But we've talked about this season and how the Grizzlies were often just as good without Ja. In fact, I think they had a better record, at least at one point in the season, they had a better record without him than they had a winning percentage with him.
Oh yeah, they had they were 20-5 without him, which is that's an 80% win percentage.
Yeah.
So that's about a 65 win pace, 66 win pace,
Which is really good.
which is better than they were. They won 56 games. So yes, they were by record better than
better
without Ja
than
than they
with
were
him.
with him. But those 25 games were not played against the Golden State Warriors in a playoff series.
Sure.
Like, there's no way that this team, in a series like this where they have to beat a really good team, is going to be better without Ja.
Well, right. But the key there is you have to be playing against the Golden State Warriors. And this was not really the Golden State Warriors. They slept. It seems like they slept a bit on the Grizzlies for this game. You just said they probably felt like, Ja's not in this game. We don't have to worry too much. Well, when you see that their record is better without Ja than with him, why are you underestimating them?
Because you're the Golden State Warriors, and apparently you can get away with it because they still won the
They
basketball.
did get away with it, barely.
Yes. So this game was interesting, though, because it wasn't like the only story here was that Ja Morant was out. Steve Kerr was out for the game as well.
Yeah.
So Mike Brown had to assume head coaching duties literally on the same day that he was announced to become the Kings head coach next year. So he became a head coach twice in a day. And I'm sure Mike Brown has
for him.
historically been an underrated coach. I think he was maligned in his first run in Cleveland because he was coaching LeBron and they didn't win. And when you coach LeBron and don't win a championship, you suck. That's the rule. And
Like the former Lakers coach,
Yes.
Frank Vogel or somebody.
yes, Frank Vogel won a championship, but now he's not winning anymore with LeBron, so he sucks and he got fired. So that's the game. That's how this works. So I think that did have an effect. I think the fact that Adrian Payne tragically lost his life, and that was a close friend of Draymond Green, he was devastated. I think that affected them as well. And again, I will get to this because this is the main talking point of this series because I think the series is basically over now. I think that Jordan Poole had some struggles mentally in Game 4 because of all that had transpired over the previous 2 games, namely what happened in Game 3. And so he wasn't quite his normal self. And it should be mentioned that the Grizzlies aren't a better team without Ja Morant, realistically. But they are definitely a better defensive team without Ja Morant because Ja is... I've seen some bad star point guards on defense. He's the worst I've ever seen. He is so bad defensively. Like, it's
Worse than Rajon
You
Rondo.
described him as a
or
traffic cone the other day.
I would describe him as a traffic cone again today because but the thing is, at least I see a traffic cone, right? Like I can
like
see a
traffic
big
cones.
orange thing sitting there and just go around it. I don't move it out of the way like on Saul, but
Who moves a traffic
what kind of
cone?
asshole moves a cone? But
I need to get a traffic cone. I can't be in highway design my whole career and not have a traffic cone
Gotta get
in my house.
But see, like the thing is, there were times when I was watching Game 3 where the Warriors just blew Memphis off the floor, and there were times where Jordan Poole got into the lane. I kind of highlighted it on our chat where I mentioned 5 straight possessions were Poole 3, Poole layup, Poole drives to the hoop and gets fouled, Poole dunk, Poole drives in, gets an open 3 kick out for a 3-point shot make. And the entire time I was like, who the hell's been guarding Poole? And the answer was Ja, but I had to go back and check because he was so uninvolved with the play that I forgot that he was actually supposed to be defending Jordan Poole. He offered no resistance. Like normally when you blow by somebody or you cross somebody up and you take their ankles, you at least see them because they're trying. They're out there doing something and they're just getting beat. Ja, it's hard to even notice he's getting beat because he's not a presence. He's just right by him every time. I mean, it was evident in the Timberwolves series when Patrick Beverley's old ass was consistently getting 2 feet in the paint, driving against you. You're doing something really wrong. And I'm not saying Ja has to come out there and be Gary Payton and be just a tremendous perimeter defender. He's never going to be that. He's too small. But the effort isn't even there. There's no resistance. There's not even go around me, force you this way. It's just I'm standing here and now you're standing there and I'm still standing here. Like nothing has changed. Like you're not a factor. And I think that's
what a traffic cone does.
Like that really galvanized. Yes, that's why he's a traffic cone.
Well, maybe he's more of a delineator, right?
Yeah,
like
maybe
a raised pavement marker, something.
Sure, whatever, however you want to describe it. The point is, he ain't moving and he ain't getting in the way. But I think that without him out there, their defense definitely took a step forward, and it probably caught Golden State a little bit off guard. And frankly, asking Mike Brown to make adjustments on the fly when he's been suddenly appointed head coach in this situation where he's there as an assistant coach to manage their defense because that's what Mike Brown's specialty is. And now he has to do all of the substitutions, all of this work. It's difficult, and when your team is struggling and it's your veterans that are struggling, you can't really coach them out of it, especially when you don't have that level of trust. Like, how are you going to tell Steph Curry, help him along the way? It's never been your job. That's always been Steve Kerr. So I think that was a bigger factor than people want to let on. And, as much as I've criticized Steve Kerr on this podcast, I have also acknowledged he's capable. He's made some good adjustments in this series. And without him there, that adjustment just never came. So it became pretty much a willpower game where whether or not Steph Curry was going to rise to the occasion in the fourth quarter, which to his credit he did. But I feel like the Grizzlies, this was their chance to sort of catch Golden State off guard and maybe get one in Ja's absence, especially in San Francisco. And they just didn't get it done. And the main reason they didn't get it done was because the guy that was suspended for Game 3, Dylan Brooks, came back for Game 4 and was so bad. Like, he was cranking up hero ball shots even though he wasn't making anything. Like, it was one of the most pathetic performances I've ever seen. And credit to Bill Simmons for predicting it on his podcast where he said, this guy is going to come out and he's going to get the hell booed out of him because of what he did in Game 2 when he injured Gary Payton II on a flagrant 2 spot. And that's why he sat Game 3. And Dylan Brooks is the type of guy that wouldn't let that fuel him in a positive way. It would cause him to play recklessly and stupidly. And that's exactly what he did. He took so many bad shots. He threw up a bunch of air balls. He was just absolutely awful, and he's the reason why Memphis couldn't get the win.
How is Steve Kerr doing? Do we know that?
He's got COVID, and he had symptoms. I mean, yes. He handed off the reins to be the head coach for that game before he actually tested positive because he was not feeling well.
Oh, he was feeling bad. Okay.
Yeah, so he was already dealing with symptoms before he was tested and ultimately came back positive.
Yeah, and I think that there was some known potential for this happening because he was wearing a mask, which is something we hadn't really seen him do because I think he was exposed to somebody who had contracted COVID. So he was aware that this could be a possibility. Yeah. So he was taking extra precautions. Then it turns out he had it. So what I know is that he's not traveling with the team for Game 5. I think the NBA protocol is you have to have 2 negative tests 24 hours apart. Yeah. And
okay.
If he's symptomatic, it's probably going to be a little while before that happens. It'll probably be at least a few days. But
I will give him props for taking those extra precautions because a lot of people are, who are vaccinated and are exposed are not taking those precautions because I don't think the CDC guidelines even require you to anymore. A lot of organizations don't require you to anymore. So
yeah, but when you're in the NBA and it's one thing for Steve Kerr to get it It's another thing if he gives it to Steph Curry or Jordan Poole.
Especially in the playoffs.
Yeah, and they have to miss time
Yeah.
for that. That would be an absolute disaster. So he absolutely had to do that.
So I'm the journalism teacher at DeMatha. I'm the advisor for the Stag Line, which is our student newspaper, which we do in an online forum.
Former editor of the Stag
I'm
Line
also
as well.
Former editor. Today, one of my students, who's a big Warriors fan, published an op-ed basically making a case for Jordan Poole as most improved player this year. Ja Morant wound up winning the award. Poole was not in the top 3 vote getters. It was Morant, Darius Garland, and DeJounte Murray, who were the top 3 guys. And so I'm just curious, Eric, for your thoughts on where you think that Jordan Poole deserved to be within that conversation for most improved this year.
Well, it's a little bit tricky because Poole was good this year. There's no doubt about that. But early on in the season, seemed a little bit struggling to find a role for him. Like he started initially, and for the first few games, he was really off his game shooting-wise. It looked like he had a little bit of jitters, understandably so. He's now playing on a contending team as a key member when he was playing in the G League just last year. So, but then he picked it up, and then he kind of dipped a little bit when Klay Thompson came back because, again, sort of a shifting role for him. He went back to the bench. Thompson was on limited minutes, so his minutes got messed up. And then it felt like when Steph went down at the end of the year to finish the regular season, Jordan Poole really stepped up. And the team looked, I'm not going to say, obviously not as good without Steph, but they looked functional offensively in a way that resembled Warriors basketball, despite the fact that they didn't have Warriors basketball. And that's Steph Curry, and that's a credit to Jordan Poole. I feel like he certainly should have been a top 3 vote getter. And the reason I say that is because the guy that won the award shouldn't have gotten any votes. Like Ja Morant.
Really?
Ja Morant was the number 2 pick in the draft. He was Rookie of the Year. He was an electric, exciting young player in the postseason last year. And then this year he was an all-star. It sounds like he's doing what he's supposed to do. Like this award, my understanding of it is, it's supposed to be for people who surprise you. And Ja Morant is great, but he didn't surprise me by being this good in his 3rd year because of how good he was as a prospect and how good he was as a rookie and then how good he was as a second-year player. I just don't see the same level of jump where I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't see that coming from this highly touted player. Whereas Jordan Poole, again, rookie year, worst player in the NBA. Second year, spent time in the G League. This year, looks like he might be the second best player on the Golden State Warriors who just might win a championship. So, to me, he absolutely should have been a top 3 vote getter. I get it's a regular season award, and his regular season was at times choppy because the Golden State Warriors season was choppy this year. But I think in terms of potential and what he showed and what he's shown in the playoffs, and the playoffs are sometimes a bit of they make people look bad with these voting. It's like you're looking at Jordan Poole and you're like, how'd y'all miss this? Like, how did you not see this? Because this guy has been doing this more or less for the entire year, but the fact that he's able to be a playoff performer like he's been, it shows that maybe by the criteria required, he wasn't going to win, but he absolutely was the most improved player in the NBA this year.
So you would have picked Poole over both Murray and Garland if it was up to you. So you just said that Morant shouldn't have gotten any, so it sounds like it kind of comes down to those 3, Poole, Garland, and Murray.
Yeah, and with some consideration to Tyrese Maxey as well.
Okay.
But again, it's really tough because it's a regular season award, and I'm not supposed to use what we've seen in the playoffs as some type of referendum because that's not how the voters vote.
Right.
It would be unfair for me to say, well, I think you should have done this based on something you didn't even see yet. Like, they vote at the end of the regular season, and it's like, I can't say you did it wrong based off of what you were supposed to vote on. But
right.
I do think Poole should have been given more consideration. And like I said, Ja Morant didn't need that trophy. He's got plenty of other good things coming his way. That's an award for people who get a lot better. And to me, Ja didn't get a lot better. He's just that good in general.
Is it a narrative issue? Like, I'd never even heard of Jordan Poole until these playoffs started. But like Ja Morant, I mean, I know you said he was expected to be good, but I mean, I feel like Ja Morant blew up this year. Maybe that's what the people were voting on. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's clearly what they voted on. This is such a weird award, though, because the thing is, this is actually interesting because normally I hate this award because they just give it to a guy who scores more points, and usually the guy scores more points because he becomes a starter instead of a bench player. And I'm like, that doesn't necessarily mean you got a lot better. You just got a different job.
Right.
Like
you're in a different role.
Yeah, and so some people like Stan Van Gundy actually pointed this out, and I don't think this is where the voters went, but it is an interesting point. Jordan Poole at the end of last year, after his stint in the G League, came up and was a huge part of the Warriors' late season success, coming off the bench backing up Steph. Like, he was a huge part of the reason why they looked like, despite the fact that they didn't get out of the play-in weekend, like, they could have been a force to be reckoned with. Like, if they got matched up against the Suns or the Jazz, that they could have potentially taken them. One was because Steph was just incendiary last year, and Draymond was playing great. But another factor was they got a little bit of backup from Jordan Poole. And so you could make the case that if that was your last impression of Jordan Poole after the 2021 season ended, that coming in here and seeing him be this good this year doesn't really look like a huge improvement. It's just a bigger opportunity. But I also don't see it that way. I see it as the dude didn't even make the team, basically. He was playing in the G League and was a part-timer, and then he comes in here, and he has gotten a lot better. It's not just that he's gotten more minutes. His game has greatly taken a leap forward. I didn't
Not defensively, but...
Who, Jordan Poole?
Yeah. Said not defensively, though.
Well, I was making fun of Ja Morant's defense earlier.
Yeah, but you've also called Jordan Poole a traffic cone.
He's not a great defender, but he's
that's what I was talking about. Because 2 days ago you referred to Jordan Poole as a traffic cone. Was it maybe 3 days ago?
I thought
Is Poole more of a construction barrel than a traffic cone?
Jordan Poole makes an effort on
or like
defense.
a flashing beacon.
Like, Jordan Poole is not a total defensive liability like Ja Morant is, but he's certainly not a good defender.
More of a jersey wall then.
Yeah, sure. Let's go
Just
with
one.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, I want to stop you right quick because Chris Owings just hit a double and raised his batting average from 105 to 150, which is amazing that he hit the ball anywhere. And then the very next pitch, Cedric Mullins hits a home run. So 2-0 Orioles.
that's pretty good.
Back to your regularly scheduled program.
So Corey just checked the tape with Hugh, and yes, we were discussing. I think that was game 1.
Yeah, that was actually on May 1st.
Yeah, so that was
a
game
little
1
while
where Corey pointed out that Jordan Poole played better than Steph, and I countered by saying he shot the ball better than Steph, but Steph, had some really good defensive sequences, including stuffing Ja Morant on a key possession, whereas Jordan Poole was getting had pretty easily, regularly defensively. But I will say that Jordan Poole, again, I said he's a traffic cone, but he was a traffic cone because he was guarding Ja Morant. And that's really tough. Like, he does a better job against lesser players, which, most people can't guard Ja Morant. I don't think Steph can consistently guard Ja Morant, but that day he did a lot better job of it than Jordan Poole did. But anyway, we were talking about most improved. I think Poole certainly had an argument. I think that Darius Garland was probably the guy. If you asked me to vote, I would have voted for him not just because he took a huge step forward, but because he helped his team take a huge step forward in a way that nobody thought was really possible. Like, did anybody think the Cleveland Cavaliers would be good this year? Like, let alone a playoff team? Like, no, they didn't. And he was the reason why. So, I've got a bone to pick, though, with Taylor Jenkins and the Memphis Grizzlies and everybody who rides with them, including...
Who is Taylor Jenkins?
He's their head coach.
Really?
Yes.
Oh. Never heard of him.
I've got a big problem. I alluded to this earlier with how they've handled this series, both in the media and with the way they've treated the Warriors. And that comes from not me because I'm rooting for Golden State, but because this is absolutely preposterous behavior. So Ja Morant got hurt in Game 3, and it was sort of a mystery as to what the injury was, aside from the fact that it was a knee injury. And some people checked the tape, and the play where he started limping, it was a play where he was double-teamed, and Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins were both trying to steal the ball from him. And on that play, Jordan Poole takes a swipe at the ball, gets a piece of it, knocks it loose, but Ja retains possession. He takes a second swipe, misses the ball, and as he's pulling his hand back in, he grazes Ja Morant's knee, his right knee, with his hand. And there was a little bit of a tug on it as he was pulling his hand back. And so, Taylor Jenkins goes to the mic and says the impetus for the injury was Jordan Poole pulling on his knee. And I'm curious, and this is the quote, about what the league's going to do about that, suggesting that Jordan Poole should be suspended for injuring Ja Morant. Now, this is the second time that Memphis-affiliated people have tried to get Jordan Poole suspended for a game. They did it after Game 2 as well, because after Dillon Brooks ended Gary Payton's the second season by breaking his elbow on a flagrant 2 foul, Jordan Poole came on the floor to check on Gary Payton, and the NBA has a hard and fast rule of you can't leave the bench area during a fracas. Well,
This is not really a fracas.
It's not. Not at all.
Nobody's fighting.
No.
The guy is hurt on the floor. He just had his elbow snapped, basically.
Yeah, and so Jordan Poole came on the floor to check on him, and members of the Memphis local media were saying, oh my God, Jordan Poole needs to be suspended for this. The NBA obviously didn't take the bait. And then Jordan Poole lit them up in Game 3. And then this happens with Ja Morant, where they're claiming that his knee got hurt by Jordan Poole briefly pulling on it with like 3 fingertips. I'm like, okay, that's a little suspicious because I've watched a lot of professional football, and if every time somebody got their knee grabbed that caused an injury, they would never have any football players left.
No.
Like, that's not how it works. And so there was some checking the tape with Hugh. Earlier in the game, in the third quarter, Ja had a reckless closeout on Klay Thompson where he went flying after Klay, banged knees with Klay, and Klay repositioned himself, hit the 3, and went back down the floor. And Ja was shown being a little bit ginger, limping on that right knee. And he stayed in the game, and to his credit, he played really well. He kept scoring and stuff. And then during this same play where this knee grab happened, but right before that, on the first swipe that Poole took for the ball, you saw Poole and Morant's knees collide. Like incidental contact as this was going on. And you saw a far more drastic hyperextension and collision on that part of the play. Not to mention, the knee was being, there's some medical term for it, but basically the knee was forced inward on that play, whereas Morant's tug was an outward stress on that knee. And so an inward action on the knee would stress the inner, would stress the inner part of the knee. And then you see Ja Morant limping and leaving the game, and he's holding the inner part of his knee, not the outer part of his knee. So it was pretty obvious to me that the tug on his knee for all of a quarter of a second by Jordan Poole was not what caused Ja's injury. And yet, Taylor Jenkins went on the microphone and said, basically it was Jordan Poole's fault. Ja Morant went on Twitter, tweeted a video of it, and shared, quote, broke the code, which is what Steve Kerr used to describe Dillon Brooks' action against Gary Payton, which, again, flagrant 2, knocked him out of the playoffs. And then Ja Morant quickly deleted that. The Grizzlies kept Ja's MRI results under wraps through the next 2 days. Taylor Jenkins continued to say that it was Jordan Poole's fault. Certain members of the media backed up that notion, and they asked the NBA to look into it. The NBA looked at it and said, it was a basketball play. It happens. No, we're not taking any further action on that play. And so then, Josh sits out yesterday. He gives a very begrudging dap up to Jordan Poole before the game. And then the game ends, the Warriors win. We'll come to find out today, Ja Morant's injury is a bone bruise. Now, I don't know how to tell you this, but bone bruises don't happen from tugs or pulls.
No.
They happen from collisions.
Yeah, they
happen-
suck. They absolutely suck.
Yes.
But they're not ligament issues. Like there's no like pulling somebody's knee is not going to cause that.
No. What does cause it is, as I said before, doing a flying knee into somebody else's knee. And that's clearly where the injury
Like
came
Captain
from.
Falcon or somebody.
Yes, and they kept this ruse up to, I guess, villainize Jordan Poole, to attempt to somehow, I guess, get him in trouble because they have no answer for him.
Until the NBA made it clear they were not actually going to take any action against him.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, fine, we'll go ahead and release this report.
Yeah, but the thing is, we knew about that, a day before Game 4, and they still said nothing. They still just said, Jordan Poole did it. Like, almost to try to get in his head or something like that. And I guess somebody finally decided to say, okay, this is a bone bruise. That's the injury. Ja's probably not playing again this series. And that should have been it. And now it's like you spent 3 days making this guy the bad guy who did nothing wrong. And that's just, to me, that's absolute Bush League. And it comes from every single person in that organization, outside of maybe a handful of players that had reasonable takes after the game. Like Jaren Jackson Jr., to his credit, said, I don't think it was anything dirty. It's just unfortunate. Yeah, it's because that's what it was. Well, it turns out Jaren Jackson Jr. and Jordan Poole were high school teammates, so he's not gonna impugn his guy. And so there was a couple of people that came out and said things like that, but Ja's reaction was childish. Taylor Jenkins, who is the grown-ass man in this group, like John Morant's 22, and he's emotional because he's hurt. I get him being kind of dumb in this situation. Taylor Jenkins was dumb on day 1, and then he's been dumb the last 2 days after that. He's continued to double and triple down on this dumbass narrative that Jordan Poole deliberately injured his star player when it was obvious from the jump that the reason that John Morant got hurt is because John Morant plays recklessly. He's always falling. He's always getting hit. He's always going at 100 miles an hour, and that's what makes him exciting, and that's what makes him great. But it's also going to lead to situations like this. You can ask Derrick Rose about that, right? Like, we've seen players that play that style, and it doesn't really last. So that's probably closer to what's going to be Ja's career if he doesn't learn to slow down a bit. And I think that this idea that we're going to sit there and throw some other guy under the bus and try to turn him into a bad guy and clearly try to get into his head or something like that as a way to try to, even the score because y'all can't win the series with or without John Morant in the lineup, I find that behavior just absolutely abhorrent.
It sounds like Bryce Harper, when he first came up, remember he was running around like a crazy person with the hair flowing and stuff.
Yeah, running into the walls.
Smashing face first into walls and his nose was bleeding and everything.
Yep.
But then also I'm reminded of, I think it was John Wooden who said, be quick but don't hurry. And it sounds like Morant is kind of hurrying out there if he's sort of losing control and smashing into stuff.
Yeah, again, like the stuff he does on the offensive end, I can't criticize him for it because he's great there. But the play where he hit knees with Clay, that wasn't just dangerous for Ja, that was dangerous for Clay as well.
And he coming back from a knee injury?
Yes, he's coming back from a knee and an Achilles injury. So probably not great for him to be having knee-on-knee collisions. But, Clay, for whatever reason, was able to sustain it. And he didn't get hurt, and Ja did. That's the way it goes sometimes. But I'm so frustrated by all this, especially because, let's face it, the Grizzlies have been trying to reinvigorate the whole grit and grind ideal that they had in like the mid-2010s when they had Zach Randolph and Mike Conley and a bunch of really tough players. And this isn't it, right? Like, if you're going to sit there and be like, we're going to be physical, we're going to beat you up, we're going to do that type of stuff, then you can't sit there and whine and cry like a bunch of babies when one of your players gets hurt. Like, and that's what happened here. You bitched and moaned, and I'm just like, I don't have a whole lot of respect for you for acting that way. And Draymond Green actually had an interesting point about this where, teams historically have said the MO to beat Golden State is to get physical and to get tough with them. And then suddenly the entire Golden State Warriors roster are a bunch of evil, dirty players that pull knees out of sockets with 3 fingertips. I'm like, well, which one is it? Are we a finesse team that shoots jump shots, or are we a dirty, nasty, bad boys Pistons type of team? You can't sit there and have your cake and eat it too. Either we're a bunch of wimps who you can beat up, or we're a bunch of dirty players. It can't be both. So, I mean, that's kind of it, I guess, for that series. I don't expect it to last much longer. I think Golden State probably closes out in 5, even though it is in Memphis, purely because Ja's out, and I feel like the performance that Golden State had is not going to happen again, where they miss a gajillion shots. I feel like they're going to be better off in Game 5 with a little bit of clarity of what to expect and some momentum, thinking we can end this series in 5. And because the thing is, the earlier they end the series, the more rest they get, the more time Steve Kerr gets to come back. And they are an older team, so I figured that they could definitely use the rest. So they're going to be looking to end this as quickly as possible tomorrow night.
How does Golden State match up against Phoenix or Dallas?
Well, I think that those matchups are better for them than Memphis. Now, Memphis isn't as good as Phoenix, but I feel like in terms of just player for player, I like Golden State's chances against either of those teams, particularly Phoenix, because they've got an ability to slow down Devin Booker. Like Andrew Wiggins is becoming a really good perimeter defender, and he can check Booker. Now, the issue is that they don't have Gary Payton anymore, and he would have been used probably to some level of success as an irritant for Chris Paul. So now that's probably going to fall to Steph Curry or Klay Thompson, which, obviously an easier matchup for Chris Paul to take advantage of. And DeAndre Ayton is obviously going to be a size mismatch for Golden State, who likes to play small. But, they still got Draymond Green, and Green's capable of handling his business. And with the way Ayton's played at times this year, he's been unimpressive to say the least. I feel like Golden State, if they played the Suns, I think I said it a couple weeks ago, I think the difference between the two is close enough to the point where home field advantage or home court advantage for Phoenix could prevail. Like having that Game 7 at home could be the difference, but it could go either way. I feel like if Golden State had the home court advantage, I would much better like their chances to win that series. But with the equalizer being Game 7 in Phoenix, to me that would be a toss-up. But with Dallas, Golden State would have home court advantage, and I feel like a lot more would be asked in that series of Draymond Green defensively, but it also fits right into the wheelhouse of what he likes to do. Whereas this Memphis series, Draymond has been not very big of a factor. I mean, Game 1, he got ejected right before the first half ended, and Golden State went on to win without him. So, he's been a little bit neutralized because of what Memphis can do with Jaren Jackson Jr., but nobody remaining in the field has a guy like that. So I feel like Golden State, in their next matchup, will have a very good chance to win that series and come out of the West.
Oh, nice. Tyler Nevin just hit a home run. It's now 3-0 Orioles.
Look at that.
Tyler Nevin. Okay.
So that wraps up the basketball discussion and probably wraps up all of our topics, if I'm recalling correctly. One more topic. Congratulations to Nikola Jokic for earning his second straight MVP award. We talked a little bit about that a couple weeks ago during the Nuggets Warriors series, where it looked like he was likely going to win, despite the fact that his team was bounced in 5 games.
Getting bounced.
Yeah, so we talked about that already, but it doesn't change the fact that Jokic had a tremendous season again, and hopefully we won't be having this conversation about is he worthy despite the fact that his team was a 6 seed that got bounced in 5 games, because hopefully Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. will be back in the lineup, and we can get some clarity on what the Nuggets can actually be with those 3 healthy, and my belief is that team's going to be pretty good next year. So credit to him. Now let's hope he gets some help, and we can see if he can lead a team to a championship, because he's definitely on that level. He's in club superstar.
Mm-hmm. First I've heard of that, but okay.
I shared the little graphic that Nick Wright had, where it was guys that were in the club for superstar status in the NBA, and then you had certain dudes waiting outside, and it was so I think it was, since I guess why not, he had 12 guys in there. I think it was Steph, KD, LeBron, Kawhi, Damian Lillard, Giannis, Luka, Jokic, Embiid, Chris Paul. There are two others that I'm clearly forgetting right now. But and then he had a handful of people waiting outside. Looked like Jason Tatum was being admitted in. He had John Morant was also in the club. And then there was also Ant-Man, Devin Booker was waiting outside, and Anthony Davis was being tossed out. So it was pretty amusing. I enjoyed that little cartoon. But yeah, anyway, props to Jokic for getting it done. I think that'll do it for our show today. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was episode 194. You can reach us at thesportsballers@gmail.com if you want to email us. Give us some feedback. Send us a mailbag. Questions, topics you want us to discuss. We'll do it. You can find this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. We're there. And you can follow us on Twitter as well, at SportsBallers18. You can follow the three of us individually. Corey is at Corey Puffett. I am at Quagmire67, and Evan is at Evan_Ash13. Before we hit the road, do you guys have any shout-outs before we roll?
Shout out to the seniors at DeMatha. Today was their last day of classes. They got 3 days of final exams coming up. And of course they've got, graduation practice coming up. They've got baccalaureate mass and graduation and all that stuff. But
graduation practice.
Shout out to them for basically completing their high school careers. Anybody's 4 years in high school can feel pretty long at times, but especially for this class is one of the ones that had to deal with COVID during high school. So really proud of them for pushing through that.
I remember baccalaureate mass. It was in the Wooten gym for us, and there was a bat flying around in the gym.
I remember because I had to attend that because Greg was there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was a bat. Did the power go out, too? Because there was a thunderstorm. It was crazy.
All right, Evan. Any shout-outs?
What we're supposed to be talking about? No, I didn't think of any beforehand, and nobody's coming to mind right now.
Okay, I've got one shout-out, much to Corey's chagrin. Shout-out to Zach Gallen, who pitched for the Arizona Diamondbacks against the Colorado Rockies on Sunday. I picked him up at the last minute to get my 7th start of the week, and boy, howdy, did he pitch a gem. 7 shutout innings, got me 15 points, and I needed pretty much all of them. I think there was some type of stat correction that had me win that game by 3 points, but at the time it looked like it was going to come down to whether or not Will Smith could get a hit in his last at bat, and he grounded into a double play. So
it was 2.5 points.
Yeah, so I eked it out by just a couple points. So I needed just about everything from Zach Allen. The guy I cut had a decent outing, but not nearly that good. And if I had started him, I would have lost. So props to him for getting me off the schneid. I am now 1-3 and getting my ass whooped by Sean because he's got Cedric Mullins. So what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's today's what, Tuesday? Today's Tuesday now. I don't know. My team only scores points on the weekend. So
I was mad.
That's when all of my pitchers pitches on Saturday.
I was beating Corey soundly pretty much the entire week, and it wasn't just because he didn't have pitcher starts. It was I was up by enough to cover those, and then the last 2 days, Corey's team just blitzed me with a bunch of home runs and stuff, and I'm like, wow, dude, if he gets good starts, I'm gonna lose. And he got good starts, but I had Zach Gallen, so that's pretty much the only reason why I held on and won. And that's fantasy baseball though for you, man. It's a tough racket, especially when you got to pay attention every day.
Yep.
All right, so thank you guys for tuning in. Evan, go ahead. You get some more stuff.
I mean, I already mentioned Manny Machado, but shout out to Pete Alonso, who just hits bombs every single night.
Oh yes.
He's got 2 walks today and a single. Oh my goodness, love this guy. Y'all should have drafted him too. What were y'all doing?
I was drafting Bo Bichette, who has been doing nothing.
You know who's been doing nothing is Mookie Betts. He's been terrible.
Is he good anymore? Like I don't mean like good. Like obviously he's a good baseball player, but is he like MVP good anymore? Because this is like his 2nd straight year of just kind of blah.
How can you be at the top of that lineup and be blah? right? There's like 10 people who could take his spot easily.
Yeah.
So Mookie Betts, you got to get it done.
Yeah, he should be delivering better than he has been. But So before we finally sign off, the Heat are up 12 points at halftime. So I'd like to get home at some point and maybe catch the last part of that game. Thank you guys for tuning in. Next week we'll have some more updates for playoff basketball. We'll also probably get into maybe a little bit more NFL if any Hall of Fame quarterbacks decide to sign $375 million broadcasting deals again. And a little more baseball, and hopefully the Caps will actually advance, but I don't know at this point. They blew yesterday's game, which sucked. But we'll talk about whatever comes to mind and whatever comes up on the headlines. We'll have it next week when Evan is hosting. Until then.